The trading station Nexus Prime floated in the void between star systems, a massive wheel of metal and light that served as neutral ground for dozens of species. Ambassador Kexathara adjusted her ceremonial robes as she walked through the diplomatic quarter, her four eyes scanning the crowd of aliens that moved through the gleaming corridors. The Zephyrian diplomat was known throughout the galaxy for her sharp intellect and even sharper tongue. She had negotiated treaties that ended wars, brokered deals that saved entire worlds, and faced down the most dangerous criminals in known space. Her purple skin shimmered under the artificial lights, and her tall, elegant frame commanded respect wherever she went. Today, however, she was nervous. The humans had finally made contact with the Galactic Council, and everyone was curious about these new arrivals from the Rim worlds. Reports about their home planet had been disturbing. Earth was classified as a Class 3 Deathworld, a rating so extreme that most species considered it uninhabitable, even with environmental suits. The humans came from a planet where massive storms could level cities, where the very air was poisonous to most galactic species, and where creatures existed that could tear apart a battle tank with their bare claws. The gravity alone was enough to crush most beings, and the radiation from their yellow star would cook the average galactic citizen in minutes. Yet somehow these humans had not just survived but thrived on this nightmare world. They had built cities, developed technology, and eventually reached for the stars. The council was both fascinated and terrified by what this meant. Kexathara entered the main conference hall, where representatives from across the galaxy had gathered to meet the human delegation. The room buzzed with nervous energy as beings whispered among themselves in dozens of languages. She took her place at the Zephyrian table, her aide handing her the latest intelligence reports on human capabilities. The doors hissed open, and silence fell over the room like a heavy blanket. 3 humans walked in, and Kexathara felt her breath catch in her throat. They moved with a fluid grace that seemed impossible for beings from such a harsh world. Their leader was a woman with dark skin and kind eyes, flanked by 2 others who constantly scanned the room with alert gazes. "I am Ambassador Sarah Chen of the United Earth Federation," the human said, her voice carrying easily across the vast chamber. "We come in peace, seeking friendship and trade with all species of the galactic community." The formal introductions began, with each species presenting their credentials and territories. Kexathara watched the humans carefully, noting how they seemed completely at ease, despite being surrounded by beings that could crush them, poison them, or tear them apart with psychic powers. When it came time for the Zephyrians to speak, Kexathara stood gracefully. "I am Ambassador Kexathara of the Zephyrian Empire. We control 17 star systems and command the largest fleet in this sector of the galaxy." She paused, letting the weight of her words sink in. "We are curious about your unusual origins. It is rare to see a species emerge from such a hostile environment." Ambassador Chen smiled warmly. "We appreciate your interest, Ambassador. Earth has certainly presented us with unique challenges, but we've learned to adapt." "Adapt," Kexathara repeated, her voice carrying a slight mocking tone. "Yes, we've heard remarkable stories about your world. Storms that could tear apart our strongest ships, predators that hunt in packs, temperatures that swing between extremes that would kill most of us instantly." The room grew tense as other ambassadors sensed the shift in Kexathara's tone. She was known for her diplomatic skills, but also for her pride and her tendency to test newcomers. "That's all quite accurate," Chen replied calmly. "We've faced many challenges on Earth, but we've also been blessed with incredible beauty and diversity. Every challenge has taught us something valuable." Kexathara's eyes narrowed. She had dealt with many species who tried to downplay their weaknesses, but there was something about the humans' calm confidence that irritated her. Perhaps it was time to remind these newcomers of their place in the galactic hierarchy. How fascinating, she said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. And yet, despite all these supposed adaptations, you're still just soft, fragile creatures. No natural armor, no claws, no psychic abilities. Your technology is primitive compared to ours, and your lifespans are laughably short. Tell me, Ambassador Chen, what exactly makes you think you belong among the great powers of the galaxy? A murmur ran through the assembled diplomats. Even by galactic standards, this was considered rude. Direct challenges were usually reserved for private meetings, not public forums. Chen's expression didn't change, but something shifted in the air around the human delegation. The two guards flanking her seemed to tense slightly, though they remained perfectly still. I understand your curiosity, Ambassador Kexathera, Chen said, her voice still perfectly polite. Perhaps you'd be interested in a small demonstration of human capabilities? Nothing dramatic, just a simple test to help illustrate our perspective. Kexathera felt a thrill of excitement. This was exactly what she had hoped for, a chance to put these upstart humans in their place in front of the entire galactic community. What kind of demonstration did you have in mind? Something simple, Chen said, reaching into a small pouch at her belt. She pulled out what appeared to be a small brown seed. This is from a plant we call a sunflower. It's quite common on Earth, nothing special by our standards. I'd like to challenge your finest warrior to a simple contest. The Zephyrian ambassador laughed, a sound like crystal bells ringing. A contest involving a seed? How delightfully primitive. And what would be the nature of this contest? Survival, Chen said simply. Your warrior and this seed will both be placed in identical environmental chambers. We'll gradually increase the hostility of the conditions. Temperature, radiation, pressure, atmospheric composition. The goal is to see which one lasts longer. The laughter died in Kexathera's throat. You want to compare one of our warriors to a plant seed? If you're willing, Chen said with that same calm smile. Of course, if you feel it would be unfair to your warrior. The insult was subtle but unmistakable. Kexathera's purple skin darkened with anger. Unfair? You're suggesting that our greatest fighters couldn't outlast a tiny seed from your backward world? I'm not suggesting anything, Chen replied. I'm simply offering a demonstration, but if you'd prefer not to— Commander Throck, Kexathera called out, her voice echoing through the chamber. A massive figure rose from the Zephyrian delegation, easily 3 meters tall, with armor like carapace covering his body and arms that could bend steel bars. You will accept this ridiculous challenge and show these humans their place. Commander Throck stomped forward, his heavy footsteps shaking the floor. He was a Zephyrian battle-class warrior, genetically enhanced for combat and survival. His species had conquered 12 worlds, and Throck himself had never been defeated in single combat. I accept, he rumbled, his voice like grinding stone. This will be over quickly. Chen nodded to one of her companions, who began setting up 2 identical transparent chambers on wheeled platforms. The devices looked simple compared to most galactic technology, but they hummed with quiet efficiency. The rules are simple, Chen explained as the chambers were prepared. Both subjects will be sealed in identical environments. We'll start with conditions similar to a standard Class 2 world, comfortable for most galactic species. Then we'll gradually make things more challenging. Throck sneered as he examined his chamber. What's the first challenge? A slight temperature increase? We'll start gentle, Chen said, placing the tiny sunflower seed in its chamber. Just the atmospheric conditions of Earth at sea level. The chambers sealed with soft hisses. Immediately, Throck's confident expression faltered. The atmospheric pressure reading on his chamber showed levels that would crush most beings, while the oxygen concentration was so high it was essentially poisonous to anyone not adapted to it. This is your starting point? Throck gasped, his voice coming through the chamber's communication system. How do you even breathe this? It's quite pleasant, actually, Chen said conversationally. Earth's atmosphere is about 21% oxygen, which gives us excellent endurance and healing capabilities. The pressure helps, too. It keeps everything nice and compact. Within minutes, Throck was struggling. His enhanced physiology was fighting to process the alien atmosphere, and sweat was beginning to bead on his armored skin. Meanwhile, the sunflower seed sat peacefully in its chamber, completely unaffected. Perhaps we should increase the challenge slightly, Chen suggested. Let's add some Earth-normal solar radiation. She adjusted a control, and immediately Throck cried out in pain. The radiation levels that humans experienced every day were cooking him alive, despite his natural armor and enhancements. Impossible, Kexathera whispered, watching the readings on the displays. Those levels would sterilize most worlds. Really? Chen asked, sounding genuinely surprised. We consider this a mild spring day. Children play outside in conditions like this. Of course, some humans spend their entire lives working in much more intense radiation. Our power plant workers, asteroid miners, deep space explorers, they seem to enjoy the challenge. Commander Throck collapsed to his knees inside his chamber, his armor-like skin beginning to blister. The sunflower seed remained unchanged, as if the conditions that were killing an enhanced super soldier were nothing more than a gentle breeze. Stop this, Kexathera demanded. You're torturing him. We're barely getting started, Chen said, her pleasant tone never wavering. We haven't even added weather yet. Would you like to see what a mild thunderstorm looks like? Or perhaps we could simulate the conditions near one of our more active volcanoes. The assembled diplomats watched in horrified fascination as the readings continued to climb. The conditions inside Throck's chamber were now lethal to every known species in the galaxy except humans. Yet Chen was casually describing them as typical weather on Earth. Please, Throck gasped from inside his chamber. I yield. I cannot. These conditions are impossible to survive. Chen immediately began reducing the environmental pressure. Of course. Thank you for participating in our little demonstration. She turned to address the room. I should mention that we've only replicated about 60% of normal Earth conditions. We didn't want to damage the station's equipment with a full simulation. Kexathera stared at the human ambassador with a mixture of terror and disbelief. 60%? You mean your normal living conditions are worse than this? Oh, much worse in many places, Chen said cheerfully. This was more like a nice day in one of our milder climate zones. Our polar regions regularly reach temperatures that would freeze most of your blood solid, while our deserts can hit levels that would literally cook most species. And then there are the storms. Hurricanes with winds that can flip over your armored vehicles, tornadoes that can tear apart buildings, lightning strikes that carry more electrical energy than most species use to power their cities. She gestured to the sunflower seed, still sitting peacefully in its chamber. This little seed will grow into a plant that can reach over 3 meters tall. It will turn its face to follow our sun across the sky, produce thousands more seeds, and do it all while enduring conditions that just nearly killed your finest warrior. On Earth, we consider sunflowers to be one of our more delicate flowers. The silence in the chamber was deafening. Every ambassador, every aide, every translator was staring at the humans with newfound understanding. These weren't just another species seeking membership in the galactic community. They were survivors of a world so hostile that its normal conditions could be used as a torture device for other species. Your world, whispered Ambassador Veltar of the Crystalline Consortium. How do you call it anything other than hell? Chen's smile was warm and genuine. We call it home. And that, Ambassador, makes all the difference. Kexathera felt something she hadn't experienced in decades, genuine fear. She had challenged these humans thinking they were weak newcomers who needed to be put in their place. Instead, she had discovered that Earth's children were living weapons, shaped by a world that would kill her in minutes. But what terrified her most was that they didn't seem to realize just how deadly they were. To them, surviving in conditions that could destroy battleships was simply normal life. They weren't conquerors or warriors in the traditional sense. They were something far more dangerous. They were humans, and they had no idea how impossibly strong that made them. The emergency medical team rushed Commander Throck away on a floating stretcher, his massive form still trembling from exposure to what humans casually called normal weather. Ambassador Kexathara watched them go, her 4 eyes wide with disbelief. Around the conference hall, dozens of alien diplomats whispered urgently among themselves, their translators working overtime to process conversations in languages that had no words for what they had just witnessed. Perhaps, Ambassador Chen suggested gently, we should take a short recess to allow everyone to process what they've seen. Kexathara nodded numbly, unable to form words. As the various delegations filed out of the chamber, she found herself alone with her aide, a younger Zephyrian named Polvia, who was frantically taking notes on a data pad. "Ambassador," Polvia whispered, "the readings from that demonstration, they can't be correct. The equipment must have malfunctioned." "Run a full diagnostic," Kexathara ordered, though deep down she knew the equipment had worked perfectly. "And send a priority transmission to the home world. Tell them we need every piece of data they have on human physiology and Earth's environmental conditions." "What should I tell them about the demonstration?" Kexathara was quiet for a long moment, replaying the scene in her mind. "Tell them," she said finally, "that we may have severely underestimated what it means to evolve on a Class Dulam Deathworld." Across the station, news of the demonstration was spreading like wildfire. In the Korthak sector, military advisors were already running simulations on what human soldiers might be capable of. The peaceful Nexari were frantically calculating how much environmental protection they would need just to visit Earth. The warlike Drakmori were reconsidering their expansion plans, wondering if these humans might be better as allies than enemies. But it was in the shadowy corners of Nexus Prime where the most interesting conversations were taking place. In a dimly lit cantina, frequented by mercenaries and information brokers, 3 figures sat around a table covered in holographic displays. 50,000 credits says the whole thing was staged, grumbled Vex, a Korathian arms dealer whose cybernetic implants gleamed in the low light. "No species is that tough. They probably drugged their own warrior." His companion, a sleek Silithian assassin known only as Whisper, shook her serpentine head. "I watched the biometric readings. Everything was legitimate. That Zephyrian warrior nearly died from conditions the humans described as mild." The third figure hadn't spoken yet. Captain Zorak was a legend in certain circles, a Drakmori pirate who had raided shipping lanes across 6 sectors and never been caught. His scarred hide bore the marks of countless battles, and his reputation for cruelty was matched only by his strategic brilliance. "The question," Zorak said finally, his voice like grinding gravel, "is whether this represents an opportunity or a threat." "Opportunity?" Vex laughed harshly. "These humans sound like walking nightmares. How is that an opportunity?" "Think about it," Zorak explained, leaning forward. "Every major power in the galaxy is now terrified of Earth. They'll be falling over themselves to offer trade deals, military alliances, territorial concessions. The humans just became the most valuable partners in known space without firing a single shot." Whisper's forked tongue flicked out thoughtfully. "And if someone could acquire some human soldiers for private use?" "Exactly," Zorak grinned, revealing rows of sharp teeth. Imagine having humans in your crew. They could board ships in vacuum without suits, fight in environments that would kill normal troops, survive injuries that would be fatal to anyone else. A single human might be worth a dozen conventional soldiers. So, what are you suggesting? Vex asked, though his tone suggested he already knew the answer. I'm suggesting, Zorak said slowly, that we find out just how tough these humans really are. And if they're as impressive as they seem, we figure out how to get some of them working for us. Meanwhile, in the medical bay where Commander Throck was recovering, Ambassador Kexathera stood beside his treatment pod, her expression grim. The warrior who had never known defeat was covered in medical sensors and breathing apparatus, his enhanced physiology slowly recovering from what the medical team called catastrophic environmental exposure. "How are you feeling?" she asked when his eyes opened. "Like I was thrown into the core of a star," Throck replied weakly. "Ambassador, those conditions, how do they survive it? How do they live on a world like that every single day?" "I don't know," Kexathera admitted, "but I intend to find out." Dr. Helix, the station's chief medical officer, approached with a data pad full of test results. The insectoid physician's compound eyes reflected concern as he reviewed the information. "Ambassador," he said in his buzzing voice, "I've completed my analysis of Commander Throck's exposure. The environmental conditions he experienced would be lethal to 97% of known galactic species within minutes. The fact that he survived at all is a testament to Zephyrian enhancement technology." "And yet the humans described those conditions as normal," Kexathera said. "That's what troubles me most," Dr. Helix continued. "I've been reviewing the available data on human physiology, and it suggests they're not just adapted to those conditions. They're optimized for them. Their bone density, muscle efficiency, cardiovascular capacity, even their cellular structure appears designed for high-stress environments." Throck struggled to sit up in his medical pod. "Doctor, what you're saying is that they're natural super soldiers." "That's exactly what I'm saying," Dr. Helix confirmed. "But more than that, they don't seem to realize it. From their perspective, they're just normal beings living normal lives. They have no frame of reference for how impossibly tough they are by galactic standards." A chime from Kexathera's communication device interrupted their conversation. "Ambassador," came Polvia's voice, "I'm receiving an urgent transmission from the homeworld. The Council wants to speak with you immediately." Kexathera sighed. She had been dreading this conversation, but it was inevitable. "Patch them through to the secure conference room, and Polvia, make sure this channel is encrypted at maximum security." 20 minutes later, Kexathera stood alone in a shielded chamber, facing a holographic projection of the Zephyrian High Council. 7 ancient figures materialized before her, their purple skin marked with the ritual scarification that denoted their rank and wisdom. "Ambassador Kexathera," spoke Councillor Vexthan, the eldest of the group, "we have received your preliminary report on the human delegation. Please confirm that the data you transmitted is accurate." "Every word, Councillor. The demonstration was witnessed by representatives from over 30 species. The environmental conditions that nearly killed Commander Throck were described by the humans as 60% of normal Earth weather." A murmur of concern rippled through the Council projection. Councillor Zareth, the military advisor, leaned forward with obvious interest. "Ambassador, in your professional opinion, what kind of threat do these humans represent to the Empire?" Kexathera considered her words carefully. "Counselor, I believe we've been asking the wrong question. The issue isn't what kind of threat they represent, it's whether they represent a threat at all." "Explain." "The humans don't think like us," Kexathera said. "They don't see themselves as superior beings or natural conquerors. To them, survival in conditions that would destroy our finest warriors is just Tuesday. They're not trying to intimidate anyone or establish dominance. They're genuinely confused by our reactions to what they consider normal. Counselor Vexthon's eyes narrowed. And you believe this makes them less dangerous? I believe it makes them unpredictable, Kexithera replied. A traditional military power we can understand. We know their motivations, their tactics, their limitations. But these humans, they operate from a baseline of capability that exceeds our most optimistic projections for enhanced super soldiers, and they think it's perfectly ordinary. Another council member, Counselor Yisvara, spoke up. What are your recommendations for dealing with them? Friendship, Kexithara said without hesitation. Whatever the cost, whatever concessions we need to make, we want these humans as allies, not enemies. Because if they ever decide we're a threat to their home world... She let the implication hang in the air. The council members exchanged glances, understanding perfectly what she meant. Back in the diplomatic quarter, Ambassador Chen was having her own urgent conversations. She sat in the human delegation's temporary quarters, speaking quietly with her two companions. Marcus, she said to the man on her left, what's your assessment of the situation? Marcus Reynolds, formerly of Earth's Special Forces, shrugged casually. They seem nice enough, but pretty fragile. That warrior who challenged us couldn't handle basic Earth conditions. Makes me wonder how they ever develop space travel if they're that delicate. And you, Elena? Chen asked the woman on her right. Dr. Elena Vasquez, a xenobiologist who had volunteered for the first diplomatic mission, was reviewing data on her tablet. It's fascinating, actually. Their physiology is adapted for much gentler environments than ours. Lower gravity, less radiation, milder atmospheric pressure. It explains why they seem so surprised by our demonstrations. Chen nodded thoughtfully. We need to be careful not to accidentally intimidate them. Earth Command wants us to establish good relations with as many species as possible, and that means showing them we're not a threat. Should we tone down future demonstrations? Marcus asked. Actually, Chen said after a moment, I think we should be completely honest about our capabilities. If they're going to be our allies, they need to understand what that means. And if they're going to be our enemies, she smiled grimly, well, they should probably know what they're getting into. Unknown to any of them, their conversation was being monitored by sophisticated listening devices that had been carefully planted throughout their quarters. In a hidden chamber deep within the station's hull, Captain Zorak listened intently to every word. Interesting, he murmured to himself. They don't even realize how dangerous they are. This makes things much more complicated and much more profitable. He activated a secure communication link to his ship, which was docked in the station's commercial sector under a false registration. Freck, he said when his first mate answered, begin preparing the capture protocols. We're going hunting for the most valuable prey in the galaxy. What's the target, Captain? Zorak's grin was predatory. Humans. And if this works, we're about to become the most feared pirates in known space. Captain Zorak's plan was brilliant in its simplicity. 3 days after the environmental demonstration, he approached Ambassador Chen with what appeared to be a legitimate business proposition. His credentials showed him as the captain of an independent cargo vessel, looking to establish trade routes with the new human territories. Ambassador Chen, he said, his scarred features arranged in what he hoped was a friendly expression, I represent a consortium of independent traders interested in establishing commerce with your people. We'd like to invite you and your delegation to visit our ship for preliminary negotiations. Chen consulted with her team before agreeing. The humans had been instructed to explore all possible trade relationships, and Zorak's credentials seemed legitimate. More importantly, the meeting would take place aboard his vessel, which was still docked at Nexus Prime under full station security. What Chen didn't know was that Zorak had spent considerable time and money ensuring that his ship's registration would pass casual inspection. The vessel itself was a modified Drakmori assault craft, equipped with the latest in capture and containment technology. It had been used successfully to raid dozens of ships across the galaxy. As the human delegation prepared to leave for the meeting, Ambassador Kexathara was dealing with her own crisis. The Zephyrian High Council had sent new orders: assess human military capabilities through any means necessary, and determine whether the Empire should pursue alliance or conquest. "Ambassador," Polovia said urgently, "I've been monitoring communications traffic, and I'm detecting some unusual patterns around that trader ship the humans are visiting." "What kind of patterns?" "Encrypted military-grade communications, for one thing. And the ship's power signature is much higher than you'd expect from a cargo vessel. I think that trader might not be what he claims to be." Kexthera felt a chill run through her purple skin. If something happened to the human delegation under her watch, it could trigger an interstellar incident. Worse, if these humans were as dangerous as they seemed, any attack on their diplomatic team might result in Earth declaring war on the entire galaxy. "Alert station security immediately," she ordered, "and prepare our ship for emergency departure." Aboard Zorak's vessel, the trap was already springing shut. The human delegation had been led to a comfortable conference room where refreshments were served and preliminary discussions began. Chen, Marcus, and Elena sat around a polished metal table, reviewing trade proposals while Zorak and his crew maintained their friendly facade. "Your proposals seem reasonable," Chen said, scanning through the data pad Zorak had provided. "Though I notice you haven't specified what goods you're interested in importing from Earth." "We're particularly interested in your adaptive technologies," Zorak replied smoothly. "Given your people's remarkable ability to survive in hostile environments, we believe there could be significant demand for human-designed equipment." Marcus, who had remained silent throughout most of the discussion, suddenly tensed. His enhanced hearing had picked up sounds that the others missed: the subtle hum of charging weapons, the whisper of multiple beings moving through the corridors outside their room. "Ambassador," he said quietly, "I think we need to leave. Now." Before Chen could respond, the conference room doors slammed shut and locked with a metallic clang. Emergency lighting bathed the room in red, and Zorak's friendly demeanor vanished entirely. "I'm afraid that won't be possible," the Drakmori pirate said, his hand moving to the weapon at his side. "You see, humans, you've become incredibly valuable commodities, and I intend to be the first to profit from that value." Elena stood up slowly, her scientific mind already analyzing their situation. "You want to sell us as slaves." "Slaves is such an ugly word," Zorak replied. "I prefer to think of you as military assets. With your remarkable survival capabilities, a single human warrior could be worth millions on the black market. Imagine the possibilities. Soldiers who can fight in vacuum, who can survive radiation that would cook other species, who can operate in environments that would be instantly lethal to conventional troops." Chen's expression remained calm, though her mind was racing. "You're making a mistake, Captain. The United Earth Federation doesn't negotiate with pirates or slavers. If you harm us, you'll have the entire human fleet hunting you." Zorak laughed, a harsh sound that echoed off the metal walls. "Your fleet? Ambassador, your entire species just emerged from the galactic rim. You have what, maybe a dozen ships? Meanwhile, I have contacts throughout the galaxy who would pay any price for human soldiers. Actually," Marcus said conversationally, "we have quite a few more ships than that." Something in his tone made Zorak pause. The pirate was experienced enough to recognize when prey was about to become predator, and the human's casual confidence was setting off alarm bells in his mind. "It doesn't matter," Zorak said, though his voice carried less certainty than before. "You're trapped aboard my ship, in a room designed to hold the galaxy's most dangerous prisoners. The walls are reinforced tritanium, the locks are quantum encrypted, and the atmosphere can be adjusted to incapacitate any known species. That's very impressive, Elena said, running her hand along one of the walls. Though I should point out that you designed this room for known species. We're pretty new to the galactic community. Chen stood up and walked to the center of the room. Captain Zorak, I'm going to give you one chance to release us and apologize for this misunderstanding. Otherwise, my colleagues and I will be forced to leave on our own. Impossible, Zorak snarled. This room has held Crystalian berserkers, Nexari psionics, even a Vorthon shapeshifter. 3 soft humans won't be breaking out of here. Well, Chen said with a slight smile, we appreciate the confidence in your security measures. Marcus, would you mind getting us out of here? I think this meeting is over. Marcus nodded and walked over to the tritanium wall that supposedly couldn't be damaged by anything short of a capital ship's main gun. He placed his hands against the metal surface, took a deep breath, and began to push. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, with a sound like tearing fabric, the wall began to bend outward. Marcus's human muscles, evolved to function in Earth's crushing gravity and hostile environment, applied pressure that the wall's designers had never imagined possible. Impossible, Zorak whispered, watching in horror as the human literally tore through his ship's hull with his bare hands. The structural integrity readings? Elena was checking her tablet, scanning the ship's systems. Oh, this is interesting. Your ship's hull is made from a titanium steel composite, right? That's actually one of the weaker metals we use on Earth. We stopped using titanium for critical applications centuries ago. It's just too soft for our industrial needs. The wall gave way with a thunderous crash, revealing the corridor beyond. Emergency alarms began blaring throughout the ship as atmosphere rushed out through the breach. But don't worry, Chen said cheerfully as they stepped through the hole Marcus had created. Earth ships are built much more sturdily than this. We have to design them to withstand micrometeorite impacts at significant fractions of light speed, plus the gravitational stresses of our home system's asteroid belt. Zorak and his crew were backing away in terror, their weapons forgotten in the face of something they couldn't comprehend. This wasn't just physical strength. It was the casual demolition of what they considered military-grade fortification. Now then, Chen continued, I believe we need to have a discussion about piracy and kidnapping. Elena, could you access their computer systems? I'd like to know who else might be planning similar attempts. Elena nodded and approached the nearest data terminal. Instead of trying to hack it, she simply gripped the input console and crushed it in her hand, exposing the internal circuitry. Then she touched 2 wires together, and the ship's main computer began downloading its entire database to her tablet. This is a neat trick we learned dealing with Earth's electrical storms, she explained conversationally. When you're used to handling lightning strikes that carry more power than some civilizations use to run their entire planets, smaller electrical systems become pretty easy to manipulate. Throughout the ship, Zorak's crew was discovering that their supposedly impregnable vessel had become a death trap. The humans weren't just escaping, they were casually dismantling everything in their path. Blast doors that could stop tank rounds crumpled like paper under human strength. Security systems designed to incapacitate the galaxy's most dangerous beings had no effect on creatures adapted to survive in conditions that would instantly kill most known species. In the ship's engine room, Marcus found the power core that ran the vessel's systems. It was a fusion reactor contained within multiple layers of shielding and safety systems. To most species, it represented the height of dangerous technology. To Marcus, who had grown up on a world where natural lightning strikes carried exponentially more energy, it looked like a children's toy. Elena, he called over the communication system, how important is it that we keep their ship intact? Not very, came the reply. I've already downloaded everything we need. Good, Marcus said, and began systematically dismantling the fusion reactor with his bare hands. Meanwhile, aboard Nexus Prime, the station's security forces were frantically trying to respond to what their sensors showed as a complete breakdown of systems aboard the trader vessel. Ambassador Kexthara arrived at the Security Command Center just as the most impossible readings began coming in. "What's happening out there?" she demanded. "We're not sure," replied Security Chief Mordak, his tentacles dancing nervously over his control console. "The trader ship is sending out massive distress signals, but we're also detecting hull breaches, system failures, and what appears to be a complete power core shutdown. Are the humans still aboard? Unknown. But Ambassador, the sensor readings suggest that whatever's happening to that ship, it's being caused from the inside." Kexthara felt her blood run cold. "Oh no. They've made the humans angry." 20 minutes later, the human delegation calmly walked through the main airlock of Nexus Prime, escorted by a thoroughly terrified Captain Zorak and the surviving members of his crew. Behind them, the pirate vessel hung dark and powerless, its hull bearing the unmistakable marks of systematic destruction. Ambassador Chen approached the security desk with the same pleasant expression she had worn throughout the diplomatic meetings. "Security Chief Mordak," she said politely, "we'd like to report an attempted kidnapping. We've apprehended the criminals responsible and recovered evidence of a larger piracy operation that you might find interesting." Elena stepped forward with her tablet. "We've identified 17 other criminal organizations that were planning similar operations. Their complete financial records, operational procedures, and target lists are all here." Mordak's tentacles moved frantically over his controls as he tried to process what he was seeing. The tablet contained information on some of the galaxy's most wanted criminals, data that various law enforcement agencies had been trying to gather for decades. "How did you obtain this intelligence?" he asked weakly. "We asked nicely," Marcus said with a straight face. Behind them, Captain Zorak was muttering to himself in a language that the translators couldn't parse. The few words that came through suggested he was repeatedly asking various deities for forgiveness and promising to reform his ways. Ambassador Kexthara arrived just as the security team was taking the pirates into custody. She looked at the humans with newfound respect and more than a little fear. "Ambassador Chen," she said carefully, "I trust your meeting went well?" "Very educational," Chen replied. "Though I think we may need to revise some of our assumptions about galactic security standards. Captain Zorak's ship was less sturdy than we expected." Through the viewport, everyone could see the twisted wreckage that had once been a fearsome pirate vessel. It looked like it had been put through an industrial crusher. "The good news," Elena added, "is that we've learned a lot about materials science in this sector of the galaxy. I think Earth's engineering teams will be very interested in developing some upgrades for galactic infrastructure. Apparently, your building standards haven't accounted for the kind of stresses that we consider routine." As word of the incident spread throughout Nexus Prime, the various alien delegations began to understand something that would fundamentally change the balance of power in the galaxy. The humans weren't just tough survivors who had adapted to a harsh world. They were living weapons, forged by a planet so hostile that its children could casually tear apart what other species considered military-grade equipment. More importantly, they still didn't seem to realize just how terrifying they were. Ambassador Chen concluded her report to Nexus Prime Security with the same cheerful demeanor she had maintained throughout the crisis. "We hope this incident won't interfere with our diplomatic initiatives. The United Earth Federation is very much looking forward to establishing peaceful relationships with all galactic species." The assembled aliens nodded nervously, each privately calculating how many favors they would need to call in to ensure that Earth never, ever considered them a threat. In the end, Captain Zorak had been right about one thing. The humans had indeed become the most valuable partners in known space. Not because anyone wanted to buy them, but because absolutely everyone was desperate to make sure they remained friendly. After all, who would be crazy enough to pick a fight with beings who considered tearing apart starships a minor inconvenience?